Today, I'm here with Dylan Willick, and it's great to have the chance to speak with you, Dylan. Thanks for joining me.
Hey, how's it going, Leslie?
Great. Dylan is, just to give everyone watching a little bit of your background, you're 20 years old and a junior at Carleton College, and you are an expert skier, and you were a competitive mountain bike racer, cross-country racer in high school. And I know you had some serious injuries where you dislocated your shoulder on a couple of occasions and broke your tailbone. So I'll be interested to hear more about those experiences and how you managed to get through them. Thanks again for taking the time to chat.
Yeah, of course, it's a pleasure.
Maybe you can talk a little bit about your background in skiing and in mountain bike racing.
So I've been skiing since I was about 2 years old. My parents got me out on the hills very early age. I started ski racing at the age of 6, and I continued that through the age of 10 or 11. After that, they wanted too many hours of my day, and so I moved to the sort of the free ride skiing scene. I did that for maybe 2 or 3 years, and I competed just in some in-house competitions at Alta. I did well in those until a younger kid did better than me. And then since the age of about 14, I've just been skiing on my own time. And as of this winter, I've been doing a lot more backcountry skiing, partially due to necessity because the ski resorts were all closed.
Right.
And so I've been, as part of the venture into backcountry skiing, I'm like tiptoeing near that ski mountaineering line, and that's kind of had me really excited recently, is the prospect of sort of doing some ski mountaineering and some real mountaineering, and getting further afield and skiing cooler, gnarlier lines.
Yeah. And so would you say, given your background in skiing, backcountry skiing, and also mountain bike racing, that you have that you like risk or that you?
Well, I mean, I was certainly raised to be risk averse and, to assess risk carefully before taking it. That said, I think the teenage and young adult psyche has maybe caught up with me a little bit. And so I definitely take some risks that maybe don't need to be taken, but, every time I come out okay, I'm like, well, that was fun. And so I do it again. And I definitely have an affection for that sort of, maybe that like high speed, but just being like just a little bit scared, like, yeah. And then, when you get to the bottom or whatever, and the risk goes away and you're still left with that adrenaline rush, it's definitely a little bit addictive. And so I maybe thrill seeking is the right word.
Yeah, so there's an element where you feel like you take a bit of a risk, but then when you're successful, then it sort of encourages
reward,
you to,
right? Yeah,
there's a reward.
Yeah.
And maybe you can talk a little bit about your background, how you got into competitive cross-country mountain bike racing.
Yeah, for sure. So I started mountain biking my freshman year of high school, because sort of the high school mountain biking league was just coming onto the scene, and myself and 3 friends sort of decided, yeah, we're all going to do this. And so we all, we got bikes if we didn't already have them, and we, started riding just about every day. And for anyone who's ever like mountain biked before, you get your ass kicked for the first, month of riding. You're like, it's so steep, it's so hard. I'm like doing a lot of walking, like it's just, but it really like it, I don't know, it pushes you. And there's also like this developmental curve for mountain biking that I found, at least, because unlike skiing, like I don't remember learning how to ski. I just, as far as I remember, I've always known how to ski and I've always been like a good skier.
Yeah.
But with mountain biking, it was just like every ride, I was like so much better than the last ride. And so you're just like, again, it's like kind of addictive because you're just like it's this constant improvement and like, oh, I did that a little bit faster this time. I felt smoother here. And so, like after a summer, I was like, after the first sort of summer of riding, like almost every day, I was pretty good. And I finished, my freshman year after riding for at most 9 months. I was, I finished third overall after 5 races for this sort of the NICA league, which is the high school league. And so you just sort of keep seeking that. And so I had this very like quick development, and then, sophomore year was pretty similar. And then junior year, I had like a sort of a block mentally where I just didn't want to be riding as much. And I like got in my head a lot. So I didn't really compete as a high school junior.
Yeah.
And then as a high school senior, I was like, okay, I want to compete again. Like I want to be riding, but I just lost so much fitness so quickly. Like the technical skills were still there, but I couldn't keep up with my friends because I was just like, I was too weak. I didn't have the muscle mass or the cardio to do it. And so that was like demoralizing. And then, so after I had finished competing in high school, so high school season is in the fall, the winter comes and goes. And then I was out biking with a friend and I dislocated my shoulder, 100 yards from the trailhead doing something stupid. And in that injury, I also broke my tailbone and, thought I shit my pants.
Yeah, I mean, I could imagine how you might think that given the severity of your injury. Maybe you can talk a little bit about what happened, how you broke your tailbone and dislocated your shoulder.
Yeah, so I was riding Little Cottonwood Quarry Trail. I'd done all the technical parts because the upper part is technical and rocky, and I ridden those confidently because it was not a new trail to me, right? I'd ridden this many times before. I know how to ride it, right? And so I was playing around because at the time I'd been working on my my manuals just as a skill, as like a little show off trick kind of thing.
When you say your manuals, maybe you can describe what you mean.
Yeah, so manualing is just where it's like a wheelie, but you're not pedaling. So you're just on the back wheel coasting.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's effectively a balance trick. As like a riding skill, it has some uses, but they're sort of limited. Like for most riding, you never need to use it.
Yeah.
But it's a fun thing to do, and a lot of my friends had learned how to do it, and so I wanted to do it. And so I was working on that at the end of the trail, and where it's just tiny little rollers and relatively smooth, wide trail. And I hit a rock with my back wheel, and bike went up, I went down, and I landed very firmly on my butt and my back. And the first thing I noticed was like it literally felt like there was a lump in my bibs, because I was just like, and I was immediately like, oh my God, I shit my pants. I was like I mean, often people get scared or have a shock or whatever, and they say, oh, I shit my pants. But I was like, oh my God, I actually shit my pants. And so I sort of
I shouldn't laugh, but
oh, it's funny. It's funny. It's definitely funny. And so I was like, and so there's, at least for me, there's always a moment right after a crash where you sort of pop up and you're like, oh, I'm fine. And then you're like, oh my God, there's no blood in my head. I need to lie down. And then the world starts spinning, and then the pain hits because the adrenaline's worn off. And And so I like lay down and I'm like, wow, my shoulder really hurts also. Because at this point I'm like, well, there's shit in my pants anyways. Like, it can't get any worse, can it? And so I start like feeling my shoulder and I'm like, where's my arm? Like there's still skin there, but there's like no mass behind it. And I'm just like digging in and I'm like feeling my arm and it just feels loose. And I was not like prepared to, I wasn't expecting my shoulder to come out. So
Right.
it wasn't like I really recognized it. And so in the course of the 100-yard but 20-minute walk to the car, and then the 15-minute but that felt like 4-hour drive to my house, and then another 15-minute drive to the hospital, I was like, oh yeah, my shoulder's dislocated. There's some screaming along the way also, of course, because it's incredibly painful.
You weren't really sure kind of what you knew. Obviously something had happened, but you weren't really sure what had happened to your shoulder. Is that right? Yeah, because I wasn't like looking for. In hindsight, it was like very obviously dislocated. I could feel the the head of the radius ulna humerus. I could feel like the head of the humerus, like right here, right? So in hindsight, it was like, oh yeah, of course this is what happened, but I wasn't looking for it. And even though I, might have a little better anatomical and medical background just because my dad is a sports medicine doctor, it went over my head. Yeah, sure.
Until I was in the car and like, oh, like, yeah, like the ball of the shoulder is out of the socket, and then I put 2 and 2 together. So the shoulder was out for about an hour. And I got to the hospital and I had good triage, thankfully, because my dad was working that night. And they're like, we want to take x-rays before we put it back in. And I'm like, no, put it back in. But they took x-rays anyways.
So, and I'm curious, how would you describe the pain that you were in?
I've always said it's an 8.
So it was extremely intense.
Yeah, it's like when you stub your toe really badly, but if that lasted for hours.
Yeah. And your spine, like, did you know that you had broken your tailbone at that time, or?
Well, I never got my tailbone x-rayed because, again, like, you don't really do anything for a broken tailbone. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't matter if it's actually broken or if it's just significantly bruised or whatever. But when I realized that I hadn't actually shit my pants, I was like, oh, well, maybe I broke my tailbone or something, and there's a lot of swelling there, and that's why I thought I shit my pants. Yeah, thankfully there was no actual pants shitting, but there was a real scare. There was a real scare. So yeah, it was just like, by the time I was like getting to the hospital, I didn't even notice the tailbone anymore. Like, the tailbone was like the first thing I noticed.
Right.
And then it was like everything was coming from here. Like, I don't even know if I could feel my feet because there was just so much like input from my shoulder that I was like, it was really overwhelming.
Yeah. So, and then you get to the hospital and they take the x-ray despite the fact that you
I'm screaming and hollering. Yeah.
Yeah. And then do you recall what happened after that?
Yeah. So then they put it back in. It took 2 people to get it back in. And there's this immediate relief where you're like, oh my God, I'm like free again. Like, everything's going to be okay.
Yeah. And
then that lasts for like a few minutes, and then you realize the pain is still like a 5 or so, and then you're still in a lot of pain, and you're like,
right.
And it's very deep and sort of disconcerting because you're like, my arm was like falling off, and now it's back, but it doesn't. It's very like, it's an unnerving injury, right? It's not,
Sure.
I mean, compared to breaking a bone, oh, I would break a bone any day.
Yeah.
To not do that.
Yeah. And
Um,
so go on, sorry.
yeah, I mean, it's just like, it's weird, right? Because you have like, you literally, I mean, when you're like, when it's out of the socket, you have, I mean, no control over the arm whatsoever. I mean, you can sort of like shrug it around, but really what you're doing is you're moving, your upper body, and your arms kind of following along.
Right.
And like you can kind of like wiggle your fingers a little bit, but even that hurts.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of sort of pain sensations flooding the body, I guess, and
Yeah.
also kind of what you allude to, where you feel like your arm is just dead weight hanging off the side of your body, right? And then there's some relief from what you were describing based on when it goes back in, but then the pain quickly returns.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not to the same extent or anything, but it's still
Right.
like painful.
Right.
You know.
So, and you get the X-ray, but I'm guessing by that point, did you have some sense prior to the X-ray that it was dislocated, or did you feel that the X-ray was unnecessary?
So I mean, yeah, when I got to the hospital, I had at that point like realized, yeah, my shoulder's out. And of course, because my dad was working in the hospital, we had called ahead, and so they knew the shoulder was out. And so they quickly confirmed that the shoulder was out, because I think if you know what you're doing, it's pretty obvious when the shoulder's like really out that it's out.
Yeah.
So they wanted the x-rays more to see if there was like fracturing of the hill sacks, I think. And then like if they could like determine anything about like the ligament structure. And so I ended up getting an MRI also afterwards.
Yeah.
And the MRI was what really indicated that I needed surgery to sort of repair it, because the surgeon was like, you could not get this repaired and you would recover and you'd feel like you could do everything, but there's like a 90+% chance that you're going to redislocate.
Right. So once it comes out, and I imagine it was out quite substantially.
Yeah.
That there's such a high risk of redislocation that the surgeon was saying that, surgery was your best option.
Yeah, and especially I think in younger people, just like the tendons and ligaments have a tendency to like get looser, and so that the risk for repeat dislocations is higher.
Right.
And I mean, of course, you hear stories about the guy with the bad shoulder who every time he falls, it comes out, but he just pops it back in and it's no big deal, because like, I can't imagine, but
right.
So like people who have that experience, and I'm like, oh God.
Yeah, and sort of like, no, it is a big deal if it's anything like what I just experienced, and no thanks.
Yeah, exactly. Like, please never again.
Right. So how long, like you got the MRI, that was when you're at the hospital, or is that a day?
That was after by some amount of time. I think I ended up getting surgery probably about a month after. Actually, the surgery was probably, not more than a few days ago, 2 years ago today. So like, and the surgery was probably 3 weeks to a month after the injury.
Right. Okay.
And
so
part of the reason for doing the surgery so close was just to like limit recovery time, because if you do the surgery after you fully recover, then you have to fully recover again.
Yeah.
Whereas I was still, I didn't need the sling 4 weeks after, but like I definitely wasn't riding yet. I wasn't like throwing a baseball or anything. So I was still.
When you say you didn't need the sling 4 weeks after, was that after your dislocation or after your surgery?
Both, but surgery, they'd want you to keep it in there for longer. But like, yeah, after dislocation, you sort of start to feel normal again after, a week, but you're still really careful with it, or I was at least.
Right. So like once you had the sense that it was dislocated and you're sort of leaving the hospital, at that point, I guess you still don't know quite yet that you need surgery after you left the hospital. Is that right?
Yeah.
So
No, definitely not.
do you recall, I mean, I guess it was a couple years ago, but do you recall some of the things that were going through your mind at the time after you left the hospital? Sort of, I imagine there was still pain at that point, or maybe you can
Yeah.
describe
I
what
mean,
you're experiencing.
definitely still in pain. Definitely didn't sleep well that night. But yeah, no, I was totally in my head, like, am I ever going to be able to ride again? Am I ever going to be able to ski again? Am I going to need surgery? Is this like, am I going to have just a bum arm? Like, oh, and not to mention, it was my right arm and I'm right-handed and I have school tomorrow. What am I going to do? Like, I can't write. Like, my hand still feels like fuzzy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like, all of that was there, and I was very like, I don't want surgery. I like, I'm 19, or what was I? I guess I was 17 at the time. I'm 17. I'm supposed to be like in my prime. Like,
Yeah.
what,
Yeah. So you had a lot of worries or apprehension, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Yeah. And then when you sort of got the MRI and or the doctor kind of indicated that surgery was your best option, did that alleviate any worry or did that intensify it?
So the statistic that like there's a 90% chance you will have a repeat dislocation, definitely I was like, okay, yeah, surgery, when can we do it? As soon as possible. I don't want to recover twice.
Yeah.
I'm going to be in pain. Let's just make it short.
Yeah. And so was this sort of belief then that the surgery then would alleviate the problem and or
Yeah.
like what information were you given about the surgery and the
I was given like success rates of the surgery. I was given, I was told what they were going to do. You know, I did not feel underinformed about the surgery at all.
right.
I, you know, I went under feeling confident, right? Like I was like, this is going to suck, but this is going to make it better long term.
Yeah. So you felt like you said you did not feel underinformed. So
Yeah.
would you say you felt like you got, maybe you can describe some of the information that you got if you recall or what
I
about
mean,
the
yeah, I
information
don't
was helpful?
like I don't recall like super technically, but the doc was like, we're gonna put in 3 holes, one in the front, 2 in the back. We're gonna look in one of the holes with a little camera, and then we're gonna pick around with the other 2. And what we're gonna do is see this tendon that's like in the MRI that's like fraying and torn. We're gonna, stitch that back together, tighten everything up. Um,
Was that helpful getting that information?
I mean, yeah, like definitely, like I guess it sort of made sense to me. Like, and I guess if you told me to guess what they did in a shoulder repair like that, I would guess, oh, they like tighten things up, right?
Right.
They're worried about your shoulder coming out, put it on a shorter leash, essentially, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So I guess none of that came as like a huge surprise to me, but it was also like I felt like I had good details, you know.
Yeah. Right. So getting those details, would you say was reassuring or?
Yeah, I mean, it made the process seem simple, right?
Right.
It didn't sound like it sounded like they knew what they were going to find when they opened me up, and it
Yeah.
sounded like they knew how to fix what they were going to find.
Right.
And so I didn't I didn't think there was going to be any guesswork, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And as far as I know, there wasn't.
Right. So
Obviously. really present for the surgery.
Sure, sure. So, but the fact that they were conveying information with confidence or a certain degree of certainty sounds like that imbued or instilled some
Yeah.
confidence in you that, as you said, it wasn't just guesswork, but they knew
Mhm.
what they would likely find, how to fix it.
Yeah, and they showed me the MRIs and they showed me the X-rays, and they were like, this crack on the X-ray, that's like a minor fracture of the ball of the shoulder. And I was like, well, that makes sense. Like when it goes back in, because they're like, and they showed me how it wasn't there before the shoulder got put back in, and it was there after. So it's like putting it back in actually fractured the Hill sacks.
Mhm.
And so it's like, I don't know, they used the information they had. They like showed me what was going on, and it wasn't like I felt like, oh, I could go in and do the surgery myself,
Sure.
of course, but I knew what they were looking at. I knew where they were looking on my body. I knew like, okay, they're going to tighten up this thing that's in the back here, and they're making two holes and blah, blah, blah. And so,
Were those visuals helpful? Like you said that they were.
yeah, I mean, I like seeing MRIs and CAT scans, and like, medical imagery is kind of cool. So seeing it on yourself is also kind of cool.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it also like, I think it demystifies it some, right? Because, I think it can be easy to view the inside of your body as like this black box where you just put things in and it does things and you're not exactly sure how it does it. But definitely they were like, yeah, I mean, you can see this here and this here, and you can see how this is, this tendon is like pulling the shoulder, back and into the socket. And you can see like, and I think actually there was like a little 3D model of a shoulder in the surgeon's office.
Mm-hmm.
And so, pointing on that and then showing my MRI, he's like, so this is, this tendon here on the 3D model, that's what we're looking at here. And you can see how on the 3D model, it's like a solid piece. Yeah. And on the MRI, yours is like 30 pieces. And it's like,
right, completely shattered. Yeah. It sounds like the process of putting your shoulder back in was quite disruptive. You said it took two people to get your shoulder back in.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So my dad like held me back to a chair, and the other attending doc, they yank your arm forward, because it turns out it doesn't just like go in it goes in the front, essentially, is from what I can tell.
Right.
So they're like pulling it forward and up, and that really hurts. They're putting it back in, and you're like, you're taking it further away.
Yeah.
And then it like clunks back in, and you're like,
right. I had a similar experience dislocating my shoulder in wrestling, and I know it can be excruciating and a bit of an out of body experience. Yeah. And sort of when I think I had laughing gas at the time, when they put the shoulder back in, it's just an odd sort of sensation to feel like someone's tugging on something and and putting it back into place. I still get a bit squeamish when I think about it. Yeah, but I like how you use that word, demystify, Dylan. And I'm wondering if, it sounds like you got good information and good visuals, I guess, comparing what had happened to your shoulder to these 3D models. And I'm wondering if that helped you, if understanding the mechanism of your injury in some way helped you with your rehabilitation or your post-surgery recovery.
Yeah, I mean, so post-surgery recovery, the first, God, I think they didn't want me doing any PT until 6 weeks out, which from about 3 weeks to 6 weeks, that gets real frustrating. or like the PT they do want you doing is like they want you like squeezing a ball or something, right? They
Right.
want you like out of the sling for 10 minutes a day, and it's like, it's just so that, because at about 3 weeks you're starting to feel good again. You don't have constant, post-surgical pain. And like 3 weeks out, I was like, oh, my arm feels good. Like I'm not going back here, but like, in here,
Yeah, right.
I feel good. I don't feel like I need to be in the sling. Like, I like being able to pick up a pen in my right hand and like write with it.
Yeah.
That's a nice tool.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I'm good to go. Like, tell me what I should be doing. And they're like, and then there's like, 3 to 6 weeks, because before 3 weeks, you hurt and you don't have like really the strength or the comfort level to move it that much. You start maybe 2 to 3 weeks, you start to want to be out of the sling a little more and whatever. And so like,
but by through the third week, when you're starting to feel good, then you said it gets harder and more frustrating at that time.
More frustrating. Yeah. And then you get to 6 weeks and they start you on things and you're like, this is so easy.
Yeah.
And like, I was lucky that my physical therapist sort of did recognize that like I was healing quickly, and we did advance fairly quickly, which is always satisfying. But it's still like, oh, I feel like I could, ride my bike, because riding your bike, is in this position. That's like a safe position.
Mm-hmm.
But, the risk reward is not in your favor, right? So you're not riding and you're just sort of, definitely you feel stuck. Like being injured sucks always, but especially when it's long term, it can be tough.
Yeah.
Sure.
So what would you say are some of the difficult things about a long-term injury?
Mostly that like everything you do kind of matters. So like, for example, if I fall on my bike and I, scrape up my knee or whatever, maybe I won't ride the next day just because like my knee hurts to move a little bit because there's, scraping. But if I did ride, it wouldn't really matter. I would have, scarring for a little longer or something like that.
Yeah,
but I don't care. It's my knee, like whatever.
Yeah.
Whereas if you mess up the repair,
right.
I mean, as it is, as it is, like going into surgery, they're like, you might make a full recovery and you might at some point feel like your shoulder's at like 100%. But likelihood is you're always going to feel like the shoulder is maybe, 90, 95%. And so like, you're like, okay, well, I want 100%, right? Because I like doing things and it's my dominant arm. So,
yeah. So did they give you a rationale for kind of like why they were holding you back at times? Like you said, well, at 3 weeks, hey, I'm feeling good here. But did you get information to indicate, well, here's why we don't want you doing those things? Or what was the communication you got at that point?
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember exactly, but I think it had to do with sort of the repair healing into the, and sort of becoming one with the like, I think is ligament or tendon or whatever that they were actually repairing, right?
Yeah.
And so they wanted, I mean, essentially like, it's like letting glue set, right?
Yeah.
You start yanking on the glue too early, it didn't work.
Yeah. That's a good analogy.
Yeah, though I don't think they used glue, but
right.
Yeah, I think they just want to make sure everything's super solid before you start, putting any strain on it.
Sure. And so, again, kind of coming back to your point that just a long recovery is hard.
Mm-hmm.
Is it, your inability to do things that you want to do. Like you said, the shoulder injury happened to your dominant arm, so it sounds like it restricted, of course, your day-to-day activities.
Yeah. So this is actually so 3 days after the surgery, maybe, or 4 days after the surgery, I was scheduled to take a IB diploma test for, I didn't have to take it. Like, I would have graduated regardless, but
Yeah.
It's one of those things that, like, I took this class kind of to take this test, right?
Yeah.
And so I go into the test and I have like my ice box that has like a full shoulder wrap, and I'm like, I am pumped up on whatever they gave me, like probably some variant of morphine or whatever. Yeah. And so, like, I'm a little loopy and I'm trying to do this math test and I'm in a sling. So I'm in like a high chair, like I'm in like a baby high chair, and I'm like, because all I can do at this point, because they give you a nerve block for post-surgery so you don't hurt, which works great, but then your hand doesn't work for a while. So I'm like trying to write, and I ended up doing well on the test.
Well, there you go, a testament to your intelligence.
Yeah. Don't do that to my ego. It doesn't.
Yeah, I had a similar experience too, actually. I remember when I was in university, dislocating my shoulder and up all night, and sort of similar to the pain you're describing, and then going to the distance education office and asking if I could just wait another day or two to take the test. And they said, well, no, this is your chance, take it or not. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to take it. And I don't recall how I did on the test, but I remember thinking, well, we'll see how this goes. But yeah, it wasn't fun. I do recall that, because as you say, you can't even really write. And so, yeah. So in terms of, like, again, sort of just having disruption to your functional capabilities, were there other kind of maybe thoughts or emotions that you experienced in relation to your injury or your recovery over time?
I mean, definitely, like, one of the things that was hard for me is PT being like, maybe I think I was going twice a week at the beginning and then once a week for a while after, until I like left for college after this following summer. But like, I have a hard time doing like it's like they give you homework in PT, right? They tell you got to do this many reps, this many times a day, this many days a week. And doing it definitely helps. I mean, it makes a huge difference. You definitely feel yourself getting stronger. Like, it's like absolutely the right thing to do. But for me, having the diligence and like regimenting myself to do it was difficult for me.
Why?
I think it has to do with like my attention span. I just forget, and then I'm in bed and I remember, but I'm in bed, so I'm like, I'm not getting up to do that.
Right.
Because it's late and I want to go to bed or whatever. And so, like, this is like that. I mean, that's maybe personal to me more than general, just because like that kind of thing is hard for me. I'll forget to brush my teeth. I've been doing that for 20 years. I still forget. Like,
yeah. I mean, in terms of the challenge, maybe some of it was just sheer remembrance to actually engage in what you were being told or suggested to do. Or like, assuming you were able to bring yourself or to remind yourself to do it, were the exercises themselves hard to get through or tedious in some way, or not?
No, I mean, they expected you to do like a 10 to 15 minute sort of circuit of exercises 3 times a day, right? I mean, the time commitment was like negligible.
Right.
Like, you could do it just anytime you got home. You just do it, and like, that pretty much gets you there. Or like after a meal, you just do it, and it's like, because it takes very little time. at least my PT was, I could do it quickly. It didn't hurt to do.
Yeah.
Um, Left me feeling like a little bit sore, but like kind of a good sore.
Yeah. Where
Uh,
were there things you felt like you were, obviously you were limited in what you could do, but did you feel like you were missing out on certain things or
I
not
mean,
necessarily?
absolutely, right? Like I got injured at the beginning of the bike season, and then I couldn't bike for most of the bike season, right? And it was
Yeah.
like, I mean, this is, terrible. Like this sucks.
Yeah.
I want to be out with my friends riding. I want to, but it's just not happening.
Right.
So you're
Did
trying to
did you
find
have expectations, Dylan, for sort of how long it would take to recover or get
yeah,
fully
I mean,
functional?
they told me like absolutely no biking for 3 months. So I think I started getting on the trainer at about 2 months. And they told me definitely like no hard mountain biking for 6 months. So I started mountain biking again in about 4 months.
Mhm.
Um, but like obviously like I made those decisions sort of well informed because my dad was sort of helping me through it, and he knew what was going on, and he knew the recovery process, and he knew how I was improving, and so it sort
So
of it was maybe a little bit aggressive, but it also kept me sane.
yeah.
So
So you said you came back to more competitive racing at 4 months after your operation, or
well, I wasn't racing or anything at that point, but
okay.
I was just I was going on longer, harder rides with friends and sort
Right,
of
right,
starting
right.
to rebuild strength and cardio for sure.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess going back to your earlier point about the rehab exercises, and sometimes it sounds like you said you forgot to do them. I'm wondering how you managed to get back sooner or than the 6 month time frame.
Well, I did do the exercises. It was just
Okay.
hard because I forget that kind of thing.
Got it. Got it.
Like I did do them almost very close to as much as recommended, and
Right.
I also think maybe just youth was a bit of a gift in terms of recovery time.
Sure. I was just going to say, what do you attribute your expeditious recovery time to? You mentioned youth, or whether, or it sounds like
Youth, youth and stubbornness.
um,
I just
stubborn.
I just convinced myself that I was good to go, and so I was.
Yeah.
Which I don't recommend. That's probably not the smart way to do it, but I was also bored out of my mind, and so
Right.
I was like, okay, I'm going out, and I definitely like first ride on dirt. It was just a dirt road or whatever, and it was super mellow. But I definitely like took big steps in terms of return to activity. Maybe they were probably all like the same steps you would normally take, but I just took them quickly and like maybe skipped a few.
So, and when you say um, you skipped a few or took them quickly, maybe you can elaborate or clarify what you mean.
Well, I mean, just like, you know, they suggest like they were like, okay, around 3, 4 months, you're probably okay to like maybe get out on a road bike. And I was like, okay, I got out on a road bike. Let's go mountain biking. Like I rode bike like twice, and I was like, cool, we're good to go.
Yeah.
And then they're like, okay, you probably shouldn't ride on single track until maybe 5, 6 months, and even then it should be very mellow. And I was like, okay, I rode on a dirt road once. Okay, I'm ready for single track. Like, and definitely like I definitely managed risk. Like I was definitely didn't want to dislocate it again. I definitely didn't do anything at my sort of technical limits during that time. But I also didn't, I didn't restrict myself to things that I thought were, boring, right? Like I I kept it safe, but like I also kept it interesting, and I tried to find the balance between, you know, so like I rode, more slowly than I usually would. And I rode on trails that were definitely smoother. But like I also rode somewhat frequently, and I also, started riding a little earlier than my surgeon wanted me to.
Yeah, yeah. And so, like, would you say that was just, you mentioned sort of like stubbornness or impatience or like,
Yeah.
um, like, yeah, why were you doing that, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, just like I was bored, and I do not like being bored.
Sure.
So I was like, uh, you know, like I'd watched all the TV I wanted to watch, and I was like, come on, I want to go outside.
Yeah. What would you say that's one of the, excuse me, harder things to manage about a long-term injury is just the boredom or sort of
Yeah,
the monotony of not being able to do things you want to be able to do?
yeah. I mean, totally.
Yeah.
And I was working at the time at a bike shop, and just like even just working, you spend all day on your feet, and you're just like, oh God, this is kind of like, it's just like, I mean, everything is just harder when you're injured, as I'm sure you
Yeah.
know. And it's the sooner you can like start telling yourself I'm no longer injured, that feels better, even if
Right.
it's not the right thing to do, right? Like,
Right. So when you sort of feel, or when you're telling yourself, okay, I'm sort of more of an active person, I guess, rather than thinking of yourself as an injured individual, that shift or that kind of switch in thinking is helpful in some way.
yeah, I mean, I definitely think it can be helpful, but it can probably also be dangerous.
Yeah.
So again, it's like riding that line of when to start thinking, oh yeah, I can take a bike down from the hanging rack. Like, okay, if I do it, like this as opposed to like this, I'm okay to do it, right? But I can do it, so that's like good. That's a victory.
Yeah.
And like coming out of the sling, like I came out of like I they the surgeon wanted me in the sling every day for 3 weeks, and by 2 weeks I was like, okay, I'm sitting around the house, I don't need to be in the sling. Like, the sling is hot, right? Like, I feel good, and I can kind of keep it in the neutral position that they wanted in without the sling, with some pillows or whatever. And so just feeling like you don't need to be confined by like the sling anymore, that feels good. And so it's like trying to find those like little victories definitely helps.
Yeah.
But again,
When you say little victories, you mean like when you're able to achieve a certain progression
yeah, exactly.
that's helpful in what way or how?
um I mean, it just makes you feel like you're having progress, right?
Yeah,
Like,
sure.
it makes you feel like you're not stuck, right? Like, I mean, comparing to the whole coronavirus thing, it's like nothing is improving or changing really each day, right? It feels like, okay, there's the same number of new cases, there's the same number of deaths each day, and it's like, so you feel very trapped in this like cyclic nature. Whereas, uh, with an injury, you can like feel your pain decreasing, and so you're like, there's like forward progress, and that feels good.
Yeah. So, if you're kind of goal directed or you like to be active and busy, that whole experience of progress is,
Yeah,
I
exactly.
guess, not surprisingly, it feels good. It sounds like it has motivational benefits or properties to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What maybe on that note, you can talk a little bit about the relevance of motivation in your injury recovery, or yeah, maybe just broadly speaking in terms of motivation and injury recovery.
I mean, definitely I know there's like a lot of people who sort of emphasize like, oh, you should enjoy the journey and not just be focused on the destination. But I feel like with injury, like that, I mean, the destination, as in like being recovered, I mean, that is such a huge motivation, right? And
Yeah.
so maybe that influences how you take that journey, right? So maybe you're doing your PT very rigorously, or or maybe you're really waiting to the doctor recommendation to return to activity or whatever. Um, and so maybe, but it really is, I mean, it's an incredibly goal oriented process, I think, just because, I mean, you want to be back to normal, right? Like,
Yeah. So sort of, to your point about it's the sort of destination, the journey, not the destination. In this case, having a sense of that destination, about being able to return to something you want to do or enjoy or are competitive at, that's important in maintaining or sustaining the motivation over time.
yeah, I mean, yeah, like I can't imagine having an injury where there is no coming back. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I of course know they exist, but I feel like in that instance, you have to sort of change your motivation to how can I come back in some fashion, right? Like, as
Right.
opposed
Right.
to, I mean, my injuries comparatively are relatively like minor. I mean, they're not life changing or whatever. Um, so it's like I want to come back as it was, but definitely like looking at like I just want, like I want to be able to do the things I want to do, right? And so, finding a way to achieve that is, I think, super important.
Yeah. Sure. Sure. And in terms of the support that one needs or benefits from, maybe you can speak to the types of support that were helpful in your recovery. I mean, you alluded to the fact that your dad's a sport medicine physician, and sounds like he was giving you information or was involved to a certain extent in your recovery.
Yeah.
Were there specific things that were helpful in terms of the support you got?
I mean, definitely, I think I had an incredible sort of network, and like the team of people who helped me recover was fantastic. And I'm very grateful for that. Uh, but also sometimes it was frustrating hearing your dad, who's also a doc, say you really shouldn't do that, when I was like, I really want to do that. And so there was this, it definitely made it a little more constant. Like, there were more reminders that like you shouldn't be doing that, you need to play it safe, um than I maybe would have liked, but they were probably all good for me.
Right, right. So, and
uh,
again, would you say that that's kind of one of the difficulties, is just holding yourself back from something you want to do or feel like you're
yeah, I
ready
mean,
enough to do?
yeah, and I mean it's I'm not the most patient person by any stretch of the imagination, but even a very patient person, I feel like, you go on, a few months of not doing your sort of fun activities, right?
Right,
And
right.
you're like, I just, I was, I'm so ready to be back to normal. And
Yeah,
your mind's, the way your mind, it sort of far exceeds the speed in which you're like, so your body lags way behind in terms of being ready for activity, right?
hmm,
But your mind is like telling you, go, 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 go. And
yeah,
you're like, but your body's like, but no. And then your mind is like, but mind over matter, dog. And you're like, okay.
yeah,
And so there's this sort of internal power struggle for sure, where you have to like use this sort of super rational part of the brain to like tell yourself, no, I'm not going to do this, because if I don't do it now, it'll be better later.
yeah,
But everything else, the rest of your subconscious is just like, but I'm so bored. Please let me go do something.
yeah. And it sounds like there were times where you made decisions to engage in certain activities, right? And you said
Yeah.
that was that sort of a risk reward calculation?
Yeah. I mean, absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, and I guess my calculations were good because I didn't re-injure it, um, until later.
Yeah. So what happened?
When I re-injured it.
Yeah.
So almost a year exactly after I originally dislocated it, I had made, I would say, like, as full of recovery as one could expect. I had not gotten injured in the interim. I was cat skiing with my family, and there was a beautiful 25, 30-foot cornice that I wanted to huck, which is, within my ability to land, right? Like, it was not, not, it was on the edge. It's, definitely up near the upper level of my abilities, but it's not like, something that's like really pushing my boundaries. And I sort of debated several lines off the cornice, and I decided that the best line would be a little bit cross fall line, because generally that makes it a little easier to land. And there was a small, maybe 5-foot tree coming out through the snow. I mean, 5 feet above the snow. I'm sure the tree is like 20 feet tall. And my plan was to hit a crossfall line, land just above, like vertically above the tree, but like, there was, 20 feet or more between me and the tree where I landed. And then to like make an arcing turn around the tree and ski out. And I thought, because I did the risk reward calculation, I was like, well, even if I eat it, I'm going to have, momentum that's going to carry me past this tree, right? And so there's deep snow, like this should be fine even if I crash. And so I hit it, and I took none of that forward momentum with me. I went straight down. When I hit the tree, I was in the middle of my second of 3 tomahawks. I was fully inverted, so heels overhead, facing backwards up the hill, and I hit the tree with the back of my shoulder and my arm, and that ripped my shoulder out. And again, at first I felt more, sort of in like my triceps region, and everyone's like hollering at me like, are you okay, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine, because it's like it was not a good place to stop, and so I put my pole on the top sheet of my ski and like used that to keep my arm 90 degrees, and I skied down, because it was not a good place to stop. And so so I made it to the bottom, and there was another doc in the cat at that time who got down before my dad, right? And by the time I was down to the bottom, I knew it was out. Like, I knew the shoulder was out. And so he gets to the bottom, this doc gets to the bottom, he's like, are you okay? I'm like, my shoulder's dislocated, I'm not okay, put it back in, please. And he's like, do you want me to put it back in? And I'm like, yes, put it back in. And I don't know if you've experienced this with your shoulder dislocations, but I started, like I had goggles and helmet on, of course, and I started to get, really like tunnel vision, sort of nauseated, claustrophobic, and I'm like, trying to get my goggles off, but I only have one hand, and so I'm trying to rip my goggles and helmet off. And this doc's like, now shout out to him, he did a great job putting it back in, like he's a good doc, but he kept asking me like, should I wait for your dad to put it back in? I'm like, no, just put it back in. Like, and so finally he put it back in, and luckily, it was only out for maybe 5 or 10 minutes this time, as opposed to like an hour.
And it was the same arm, right?
It was the same arm. And the current theory is not that this was a repeat dislocation, in that because I had dislocated it before, I was more likely to dislocate it now.
Yeah.
The thinking is that this was enough of an impact to take anyone's shoulder out, and that if it weren't for the repair, it may have been much worse.
Right. Yeah. So like just a separate instance altogether, even though it happened to be on the same shoulder, that, like it wasn't that, it wasn't strong or Wasn't sort of a function of the effectiveness of the recovery or the
Yeah.
work that had been done prior.
And I had been diligent. I had been doing my, PT for, 10 months now,
Yeah.
at least. And I was good, even though I was like at school and I'm super busy with school. I would, every time I got back to my room, I had TheraBands and I'd, be pulling. And so I was doing really well with the recovery. And so I was actually on spring break. I'd come home for spring break. We did the cat skiing, redislocate my shoulder. And, we talked to the surgeon again. He's like, this looks worse. This is going to increase the, like if there was a 90% chance that you'd have repeat dislocations before, I mean, the chances are even higher now, because not only had I, messed up the shoulder again, I'd also sort of destroyed the repair. And so they did a more involved surgery the second time, although I don't remember exactly what that entailed. But I know that it involved 4 holes instead of 3. And I think they maybe grafted some like tendon or ligament to like put in the front and like help pull it, or maybe in the back and they like tight. I don't know. I don't remember exactly. But I got that surgery 2 weeks after the injury. And so I went back to school for like 4 days to start my 3rd term after spring break. I left school for a weekend, got my shoulder repaired and flew back. And then I was at school for the whole time, again, with my right arm in a sling and just like, I mean, I definitely struggled with my E&M lab because they, it's just, there's a lot of like 2-handed tasks in there. And so just due to the sort of nature of the work I was doing and the fact that I needed to be like typing a lot of the time and writing a lot of the time, I wore the sling for maybe 2 weeks diligently. And then like I wore it for like activity. So I play ping pong when I'm at school because there's a table tennis club and we just have a good time.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to participate. So I taught myself to play left-handed.
Yeah. I was going to say, like, so what went through your mind when it happened again and you found out you needed to have an operation, this time even more invasive?
I mean, mostly like, I mean, at this point I was like, yeah, let's do the surgery. It went well last time. Let's do it again. It would kind of seem like less of a big deal the second time. Because it went so well the first time. And also I was like, well, at least I'm at school and not, at home where I really want to be biking and skiing and whatnot.
Yeah. Has it modified your activities since?
Not too much. I definitely am careful with it. And anytime I take a fall, I like check. I'm like, okay, we're good. It's still in.
Right.
And then I've picked up disc golf recently. And so you're whipping your arm around real fast. And I started to get some like lat, tricep, sort of shoulder pain just from overuse. And I got kind of paranoid because just like there's this psyche of like, I have a bum shoulder and like I messed up my shoulder again and blah, blah, blah. And I mean, it's fine. Like I just needed some time off and like take it easy. But it definitely messes with your mind a little bit because it's just.
Yeah. Are there things that in terms of your communication that have been helpful either with the physiotherapist or sport medicine practitioners?
I mean, just like being able to like actually go to physical therapy and see exercises, and like I've had some dry needling done, which makes it feel better for a while. You know, it definitely like it helps a lot, and it also is this very concrete sense of progress, right? Like when you get a new exercise, right? It's like, yeah, like I wasn't ready for this exercise before, but now I am. And so that's like I was saying, it's like a small victory, but it's like this very concrete, like I am getting better because I can do this.
All right. So again, just being able to see the progress, that things you couldn't do previously but can do is beneficial, it sounds like, in terms of your mindset or
Yeah.
your recovery. Have there been any benefits to these injuries?
Maybe gotten a little more patient as a person.
Uh-huh.
Oh God. Seeing the benefit. That's it can be hard. It has definitely like motivated me to strengthen my upper body more. I mean, as a cyclist and skier, I was sort of disproportionate. I had chunky lower legs, super strong lower body, but my arms were kind of stick like.
Yeah.
And so, it's definitely like given me more motivation to like, when I go to the gym, I try and do arms and, upper body, chest, back, at least, once a week or so.
Right. So sort of engaging in more injury prevention measures is
right.
more outside.
Yeah. I mean, I just figure if I have like a ton of muscle there to protect it, it's going to be better.
Yeah.
Like in the event of an injury.
Yeah, sure. If you could share one piece of advice with someone going through either a shoulder operation or maybe just a long-term recovery, what would it be?
Do the exercises like assigned by PT, or if you're not currently in PT, if it's like musculoskeletal, something like that, definitely PT is helpful. And it makes a world of difference. And again, it's like it also provides things that you can do, as opposed to, if you're maybe looking through your typical bank of activities, you might be like, I can't do that. I can't do that. I can sort of do that. I can't do that. I can do that, but I don't actually like that one that much. So, whereas PT, it's all about, you can do this. You can do this. Let's see if you can do this. And so I think there's there's like a positivity there that's helpful. And it's like, it's also like, it's really like, you can almost feel it healing as you do it. You can feel it getting stronger.
Right.
And the second time around, I was less good with my PT because, so for most of the time where they didn't really want you doing much in the way of exercise, I was at school. And then at the end of that period, I had a few weeks left of school, but it was like finals period. I was super busy. So I like got around to it a little bit, but not as much as I should have. And then I went to Europe with a friend, both to travel and to study in Cambridge. And just being abroad, I just did not do my PT.
Yeah. Yeah, when you're traveling and sort of out of your routine, you're sort of.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so because of that, I did my PT less, and I definitely noticed that 6 months out from each surgery, the first time I was doing better because I did my PT more.
Yeah, yeah. So just, again, encouragement to engage in the exercises and and also sort of that mindset of being directed towards what you can do helps mitigate frustration with the focus on
especially things you can do that aren't like a restriction on what you would normally do, right? So I found like the suggestion, well, you can get on the bike trainer, to be like really sort of infuriating, because it's like, 75 degrees outside and I'm on a bike trainer in my basement.
Yeah.
That I mean, that's like demoralizing. Whereas if you sort of look at things you wouldn't normally do, but you can do, and maybe have more time to do because you're not, maybe your training plan, you're just supposed to be like, on your bike 3 hours a day, and that, that takes a big chunk out of your day, right? But maybe, trying to use those 3 hours to like go on a hike or something that you wouldn't normally do, but can be fun, and can be within your abilities at that time.
Right. Yeah. So again, to the point about benefits, just exploring, maybe injury gives you the chance to explore other interests or endeavors.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Thanks, Dylan, for sharing all of your experiences and and your stories and I think there's definitely value in hearing about all the things that you've gone through that I'm sure other athletes, it may resonate with other athletes. So thanks so much for speaking with me.
Of course.
Yeah.
Pleasure.
Thank you.